Okay. President-elect responsibilities. So basically, in a nutshell, the president-elect presides at all meetings when the president is absent. They oversee the strategic plan, and they're basically responsible for the legislation at the chapter level. Having a little difficulty here. Filling a vacancy in your board. Now, typically this does come up on different aspects. So we kind of wanted to touch on it in terms of first how the president-elect now becomes the president when things switch over. Then the chapter president-elect, it's a qualified ASID member that's approved by the board. And then the director vacancies are those who were next in line. Now, the intricate part of this is that if you as a president-elect or the president, if you decide at any time, if say one of the directors actually decides they no longer want to participate at the chapter level, they either resign or just say they don't, they no longer want to fulfill their commitment. What should happen is that person's name should be submitted to the nominating committee, or you can reach out to the nominating committee first to see if they have anyone in the past, someone in the past that they could elect to be on the board. So what happens is, although you may have a person that you may know or that you may like and you think is a good candidate for that position, it's always good to submit that name to the chapter board so that your chapter board can make a decision on that person instead of just nominating that person yourself and allowing that person to now sit on your chapter board. So as a best practice, always submit that name to your chapter board first. What is a quorum? A quorum consists of 5 members on your chapter, 5 voting members. Typically, meetings can still take place if you don't have a quorum. But in terms of motions and things of that sort being made, you can present those at the next meeting to get that voted on. Chris, do you have anything you want to add in reference to quorums?
I just think we really need to touch base on the fact that you do need to have 5 voting members of your board. So those will be those people in the director positions that have voting rights, and that you should not be voting on anything as a board unless you have a quorum. So for money matters and other items, you really do need to make sure you've got that quorum and that you record the vote in your meeting minutes, and we'll get to that in a minute.
All right. So, can business be conducted by conference calls or Skype? Yes, sir, certainly. All businesses or meetings and things of that sort must involve, as Christian said, like all 5 voting members. And it can be done through Skype, it can be done through email, but everybody must agree upon what's being taken place during those calls, whether they be calls or whether they be teleconferences or by emails. Now, what we do recommend when it comes down to your strategic plan and work planning and annual budget, that those meetings, because they're more detailed, that they be conducted in face-to-face meetings. Is there anything you want to touch on there, Crystal?
Yeah, so my chapter is one of those chapters that is geographically challenged, and so we do rely on Skype. We've tried it a few times to be able to vote on items that related to strategic plan and work plan, because as long as we could see and hear each other, that worked well. But we really did still rely. You are required as a board to meet 4 times at least face-to-face. And so if you really follow kind of when we're going to talk about in a minute sort of the calendar year in your planning, if you kind of follow that and work your board meetings that are face-to-face around the strategic plan and work budget, you should always be face-to-face. But again, you can use Skype in an instance where you might have a member that can't make it to the meeting or something like that, because we do understand some of the chapters do have geographic disadvantages.
All right. And as I discussed in the beginning of the presentation, this is a basic annual schedule overview, and Crystal is going to run through this and just point out different things as to how, what things take place at National and how that fits into your roles and responsibilities as well.
Yeah, so we've kind of laid out the annual schedule from January through December, but I kind of want to start kind of with the fiscal year where ASAD starts their annual year. So let's look down at the bottom in October. So that's when your fiscal year begins. That's when the changing of the guard happens from the old board to the new board. So that's when you will step up from president-elect to president in this coming October. And typically you have a leadership summit to mind that handoff at that point. In November, it's really kind of a downtime. You host Real World Design Week, and then it's up to whatever your chapter event might be. And then during this time, the presidents will be finalizing, the outgoing presidents will be finalizing their roster and their committee and getting the names to the board for final vote for the new positions that are coming available for the election slate. And then in December, and that's not something that you need to worry about now, but it's something good to keep in mind for next year. And then in December, sorry, could you go back to that? Lost my page. December, that's when the election slates are due, December 1st. And then we do ask that you post any candidates that you are looking to have voted on your websites and get those out to your membership to have a 1-month review time. So that happens in December. Then into January, you send out your ballots to the membership, and then that's when we typically hold the legislative symposium. And as president-elect, that's something that will be a big part of your year. As Angela mentioned earlier, you are kind of the legislative liaison for the board. In February, you'll gather your election results, and that's when we hold our President's Forum. And we are kind of finalizing the details on what's happening this year, but that will be happening in February. And then in March, this is kind of use your downtime kind of in January and February, President-elect, as you're getting ready. March is kind of the real big push to get started on your strategic plan development. And this can just be something that you glean through from your board meetings and start developing what you want, where you want to plug in for your chapter to create your strategic plan. And then in April, you'll hold your strategic planning meeting with the board, kind of bring what you've developed at this point to the board and have that discussion and start to really formulate that plan and what the roles of specific board members will be in that upcoming plan. And May, so this April is a good meeting to have face-to-face. And then April or May, I'm sorry, would either be really good meetings that if you're challenged to get everyone there, that would be some good months. This would be when you're going to present your preliminary plan to the board once you've kind of made the changes from the strategic planning meeting, and then you work forward on your board meeting. Sorry about that. And then you'll have your work plan meeting. So now that you've got kind of strategy put together, you're going to have a planning meeting with your board to now start putting budgetary numbers into your strategic plan. And then in June, this is when you have your work plan meeting to kind of finalize some changes that you may have made in May with the board. And it's a good time. We found a lot of boards kind of piggyback this with the whole board to CLC as well on design by saying an extra day or coming early to create that board meeting. Again, another face-to-face opportunity. This is something that's required. We would really, or not required, but we really encourage your entire board to attend if you can. And again, it's going to be in LA in June this year. In July, you'll start to finalize that work plan, make any tweaks that you have gotten from the information with the board and the feedback from your chapter. And then August is when you're really going to put that together, finalize that, and get it ready for board approval. So that's another great month to have another face-to-face meeting. Again, this needs to be a board-approved meeting. You need to be able to see, all voting members need to be and here, because you will be approving the entire plan at this point. You'll approve the work budget, the strategic plan, and the work plan pieces of that. And then in September, that's when National is asking for those plans to be turned in to National for review and record keeping, and then that kind of finalizes your year as president-elect, and then you head into your president year in October.
So I noticed that after thank you so much, Crystal. I noticed that after the survey responses went out, the majority of the president-elects wanted to know basically what was this strategic planning. So we kind of have it set up here in 4 steps. 1 being research, 2 being strategic planning, work planning, and budget, implementation, evaluation. And I'm sure you're wondering, okay, what does all that mean? So I actually have a document that after the presentation, I'll give to you so that you'll have just in case you don't have it in your chapter office now. But the recommendation is that as the president-elect and being chair of the strategic planning, the recommendation is for you to select both the strategic planning and work plan committees, and just to make sure that they understand the time commitment that's involved in this. Because the way that it's laid out is that you should plan 2 days for strategic planning meeting, and then 2 days for work plan meeting plus preparation time. As Crystal stated earlier, the strategic planning meeting should take place before the end of March. And we do recommend that you can use a neutral facilitator. It doesn't have to be a chapter member. And you should circulate the appropriate documents to the committee at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting. Just as an example, those materials should include the previous year's strategic plan, exception report, what was accomplished, why it wasn't accomplished, recommendation of disposal, and once you get this form, you'll be able to see all of this as well. As Crystal mentioned, you want to make sure that you prepare a plan for the presentation to the chapter board in March or April, and then have your work plan meeting prior to the end of May or June. Prior to the work plan meeting, you should meet one-on-one with each committee and project chair to discuss how to develop certain tactics, including resource estimates. The committee and project chairs should complete tactics with resources, and they should be submitted to the president-elect 2 weeks prior to the work plan meeting. So that's just kind of an overview of the strategic plan. And as I said, once this webinar is over, you will get this documentation. You can go through it, review it at your own leisure, and if you have any questions in reference to it, you can always shoot me an email, and you'll see my email at the bottom as well. Crystal, you want to tackle the board meeting agenda?
Yeah, so with the agenda, your year as president-elect, you're really going to be putting together the agendas with your president. And so these are some of the pieces and parts that we'd like to see in an agenda. And again, it is up to kind of what is comfortable with your board and what level of detail you want to get down to. But the more detailed that your agenda is, the easier it is to translate that over into meeting minutes and then to manage your time so that you can respect all of your board members' time. The few minor things, obviously, date, time, the place that you're going to be meeting, or whether it's a conference call, the number and information for that communication. Please send out the agendas at least 2 days prior to your meeting, just so that people can have time to review and make comments. The president will typically preside over this meeting, and they'll call it to order. and then you take attendance every time. You want to make sure that if you're going to have something on that agenda that needs a vote, that you have ascertained a quorum. And Angela, can you go back to that slide? It looks like it's kind of supposed to. There we go. Thank you. And then you will. The first item on your agenda should always be to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting. So once you close your meeting, the meeting minutes should be sent out to all of those who attended for review and comment. And any comments should be taken under advisement and added. And then that needs to be approved by the board. And then you can have miscellaneous committee reports and have those attached to the agenda as well. My board, we particularly would alternate months where certain committees would conference in with us. And again, it's up to your board and kind of what committees you are presiding over. But we do require that then you send that out to, well, I guess it looks like they're asking for it to be reported 2 weeks prior to the board meeting. And sometimes it's not, sometimes you can't meet that deadline, but that is what we would ask you to do. And once you get into the habit of it, it really becomes second nature. And the other thing is, too, that's not listed here, and maybe Angela will touch on later, that we do ask for those meeting minutes to be forwarded to your chapter support team advisor. So each of you should have been in touch with, or your president was on a call with your chapter support team advisor. And so they want to see those meeting minutes as well, so that they can kind of monitor what's happening in your area.
All right. Committee reports. As you stated, we want you to attach those committee reports to your agenda, but we don't want your committee reports to be the basis of your meeting. So that's why the best practice, to send the committee reports out 2 weeks prior, just in case if your chapter board members do have questions and things of that sort that they want to get answered. Time could be allowed for that as well as for clarification, but you should never allow those questions from the committee report to be the sole basis of your chapter board meeting. Running a successful board meeting. You want to tackle this one, Crystal?
Yeah. Sorry, I was on mute there. So board meetings are a great opportunity to get together, obviously, with your board and kind of tackle any hot topics that you might have. And we just want to really kind of make sure that to have a successful board meeting that you kind of have these pieces involved in it. So, have an opportunity for your officers and your committee members to report out on their progress. Anything that they were tasked with, you want to follow up with on this agenda item. And then each director should be bringing any reports that they had that were requested from the prior meeting, and also bring the prior agenda so that you can review that and vote on it. You'll want to make sure that you tackle any unfinished business, bring up any new business, and then when you close the meeting, you should kind of you need to have a motion, sorry. I'm sorry about that. No, you don't need to have a motion. When you adjourn, you can just close that meeting out.
Open versus closed meetings. I get this question a lot, mainly from the admins, and I guess because most of them do a lot of the preparation for the chapter board meeting. You can have meetings where you have your design committee chairs, maybe some of your student members, things of that sort. But when you actually are discussing board business, those committee chair members and student members and things of that that sort actually need to exit at that time. And just it's always good too if you don't want to say, or if you don't want to tell them to leave. Actually, in the agenda, that could be a line item in the agenda that that the next item up for business is going to be a closed board meeting. So it's just going to be just for the 8 voting chapter members, and then that way you don't have to make them feel uncomfortable about leaving the meeting. You want to You have anything else you want to add to that, Crystal?
No, I think we kind of touched on it.
Okay. Robert's Rules of Orders, why? It's just always important to keep your meetings orderly, you know, to keep meetings on time and on topic as well, just respecting everybody else's their tasks or their, you know, other engagements that they have as well. And then you also want to allow time for all of the chapter board members to have equal participation in the meeting. And as always, the president is the one that is in control. Robert's, how much? How strict should you be? Address the president as madam or president, use a gavel. That's actually up to your chapter, but just respect as a whole during board meetings should always be forthcoming as well. You have anything in reference to this slide, Crystal?
Yeah, I think it's just important to remember that the rules of order are really kind of just a guideline to help you manage your meetings if you're having problems keeping on topic. And really just, it's up to your chapter and how in your chapters kind of have already established ways that they're holding meetings, and your president may or may not change those, and when it's your turn to manage those meetings, you can change that as well. But it really is up to kind of the personalities that you have on the board and your discretion as to how formal you want to make these meetings. But it is important to ensure that you have your voting members, and most importantly, your directors need to be involved in every meeting that you have in one way or another, whether they call in or they're there in person. But it is important to have board participation at these meetings so that they can be concise and on time.
So it's just a basic guideline of Robert's Rules of Orders, and just in terms of the whole the respect piece that we were discussing. President recognizes each person before they speak. Everyone has equal amount of time to speak. Try not to allow those meetings to go back and forth because they do throw off the main purpose as to why you guys are having a chapter meeting as well. Anything else, Crystal, from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think that if you find that your chapter, that your board meetings are either running long or you're getting off topic, it might be worth your effort to assign kind of a timekeeper, someone that just keeps the conversations on track, because it is easy to get off topic, and sometimes you just need to have a secondary call to address things that might be brought up at the time that you're having your meeting. So just, you know, be fluid, but I think if you have problems keeping on time, then you know, make those assignments and really engage your board and make everyone responsible to be on time and keep on task.
Okay, Crystal, you can, this goes into your other slide, so you can touch on minutes and what to include.
So I just wanted to show an example of a chapter, just the Washington Metro chapter you'll see coming up, where they've got kind of, it's a little example of some meeting minutes that work well, that report out what's happening in their chapter and also talk about, you know, what happened in that meeting. And again, it's really up to your chapter and what you feel comfortable with, but we really do need to get I'm sorry about that. I had another call coming in. I apologize. So make sure that the minutes record what was done and not what was said. And, you know, if you had a special topic at the meeting, make sure that's recorded. Record specifically the date and place, if it's a conference call, and then who attended, because you're going to start keeping records of who attended those meetings for future use. And then whoever is introducing the motion to the second. Make sure that if you're voting on something, make sure you put down the person that introduced that measure to become a motion.
So this is a brief, this is actually sample meeting minutes of a chapter that, the Washington Metro chapter that Crystal, you currently advise, right, Crystal?
Yes, yeah. So this is one of the chapters that I'm presiding over, and you can kind of see where they talked about who was present and then who was coming from the incoming board. They did mention that there was a quorum current for that meeting, and then they listed that they approved the minutes from the prior meeting, and then they kind of go into announcements. So each person on the board, each director had a little bit to say about where they were standing in terms of what was on their plate in terms of agenda items. And so it kind of goes through there, and then at the end of their meetings, they actually put out kind of just a reminder to the directors of what are upcoming events in the area so that they can continually remind themselves to get that information out to the chapter. And I think it was just kind of it's a nice example of how to track this information in a concise manner. And they did a lot at this meeting, but really it's about having a report from your finance director. You should be getting quarterly reports and managing those funds and making sure that you are where you need to be and get those reports done. And then you just kind of, whatever assignments are for all of the directors on the board, they just have a chance to report out.
Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. And at this time, we are open to take a few questions if there are any. And you can just type your questions in the little question bar. Crystal or myself will be able to assist you. Okay, I see that we do have some. Will you get a copy of this presentation when it's done? Yes. I will forward out a copy of this presentation to all president-elects when we are done with the presentation. As of right now, Legislative Symposium, I haven't heard anything in reference to that, but what I will do when I include this presentation is that I will give you the email address for Alexis de Amars, who works in our Government Affairs Department here at National, and she'll be able to provide you more information about that as well. Currently, the president-elect does not run the meeting, but in the event that the president is not there, then the president-elect does step in and runs the chapter board meetings. That is correct, right, Crystal?
Yes, yes, that is correct. And typically what we've done in our chapter historically is that the president-elect kind of becomes the person who takes the meeting minutes down to help facilitate that meeting.
Okay. So Crystal just kind of answered the next question. The question was, administrator takes meeting of minutes. I think in some chapters the administrator is there in the meetings, but as Crystal stated, the president-elect as well can take the meeting minutes.
Yeah, we have. There are just a few chapters that don't have administrators, and my chapter is one of them, and I think that's why we have the president-elect do that. So it is up to your chapter and what your agreement is with your administrator.
Okay, it says, what are National's requirements and qualifications for nomination to president position? Well, I know typically if you've already been voted as a president-elect already within your chapter board, then your next level of office is president. So it's just that running cycle as it has always been. I don't think there are guidelines that specifically says. I mean, there are certain things that we are looking for. You know, we want you to be committed to being a chapter leader. You know, we want you to, express your love for ASID and be committed and serve on the board. But typically, if you're already a president-elect, if you have been entrusted with that at the chapter level, then you just move into being president. But I can find out more information for you as well.
Yeah, they have. Your president received an election kit, or your outgoing president, to that effect, talking about kind of the requirements there. And basically, you need to be an allied or professional member of ASID in good standing, and they typically like to see. So those of you who are president-elect will just transition into becoming president. If you had to fill a president-elect position, or a president position, they do ask that it was someone who served on the board within the past few years. That's kind of outlined in that kit. And there's kind of other requirements, but basically, you know, anyone who is currently president-elect and has been already approved by your chapter and ASID National has vetted you out, that you will just step right into that president role in October.
Great. Yes, there was a question in reference to strategic planning. Yes, I do have a 7-page document here. I didn't want to present it totally, but this document does outline the expectations and how you should go about planning for your strategic plan. And I believe the last question was President's Forum. During President's Forum, only the President attends that meeting in February. But then in June, that's when the entire chapter board will come to CLC, hopefully. The President does not attend, but you as the President-elect will be attending because you'll be the incoming President. Sure, I'll give you this document right after we're done here in reference to the strategic plan. And if there are no more questions, I thank you all for taking the time out for allowing us to present this webinar to you, and I hope that it was informal. If you have any questions in reference to this webinar, or you feel as though you need additional training or anything else, please use that email address there, myself, Angelo Ford at a4asid.org. I'm sorry, one more question. We are looking at the content for CLC, and based off of last year's content as well. So as we get further and closer to that, I'm quite sure there will be various surveys going out to each chapter board leader in reference to what it is that they want to see and experience at CLC. So if there are no more questions, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.